Well, hey, friends, welcome back to the podcast today. I've got a fun episode for you today. My podcast guest is Dr. Arianna Sholes-Douglas. She is Dr. Arianna on social media. She's a double board certified gynecologist who has started really trying to help people like demystify menopause. Help women take charge of their health, especially if they are in menopause. She's been recognized as a top 45 women's health expert over 45. She is from Tucson, Arizona. So shout out to all of our Arizona people. But she is a wealth of information, you guys. She's the best-selling author of the book, The Menopause Myth. And she has over 30 years of experience with women's health, with menopause, etc. Listen, if you're one of the handful of men that listen right now, please stay listening. Don't turn this podcast off because surely you either have a wife or a daughter or a mother or a sister. And because the truth is, every single woman is going to go through menopause. So we have a fascinating conversation. I hope this is super helpful for those of you who are either in perimenopause, the throes of menopause, or like me, perhaps you are postmenopausal. Also, we make our son Easton very awkward, very uncomfortable on this podcast episode. But it's worth it to talk about hard conversations about the woman's body. So without further ado, we're going to welcome Dr. Arianna. Dr. Arianna, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you. Okay, here's how I think this came about that I'm even having you here. Since I've had a podcast for 7 years and we have lots of downloads and lots of just really amazing listeners who listen every single week without fail. So I get a lot of emails from people. Hey, I just listened to your XYZ episode and I've got a guest that I think would be a good fit for you. And 99% of the time I hit nope, nope, nope. I don't even finish reading them because I'm like, it's just spam. They're sending this to 500 people. But I think I got something from your team and I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. She's talking about menopause and I want to talk about menopause. And so I literally like actually read that email because I was not familiar
No.
with you, didn't know who you were. But instantly I was like, I need to have this woman on my podcast because A, clearly you're very smart. But B, I'm 53. I hit menopause when I was 45, and we can talk about that. And I did a podcast a couple of years ago about how like menopause was really affecting me in business, which I didn't really see it coming. Also, I think there's such like this, oh, what do I want to say? It's almost like when doctors don't know what's going on with you, they'll just blame menopause. I have some big thoughts on that. I had been trained to think that during menopause, I would probably feel ragey and my husband was just going to have to put up with big emotions from me for years and years and years. I don't know that that's really been the case. And so menopause has really affected a lot more of my mental capacity, I think, than even like my physical body. And I know, my audience, I think like I told you before, is probably 99.9% women. So for the two guys that are listening, thank you. This could help you if you're married or have a mom or sisters. But it's
That's
also,
actually really important. Not to
yes,
cut you, but
yes, interrupt me, say that.
that
Yes.
is so important because actually, you know, men are affected by this, a lot, and
Yes.
it's causing a lot of chaos with, relationships, marriages, and
Yeah.
there's no coincidence that, around 40s and 50, people are breaking up and just not being able to tolerate things. So, and there's some science behind that. So, but all that to say, this isn't an issue that just affects women. It actually is an
Yeah.
issue that affects the entire family.
Thank you for bringing that up. And as soon as you said that, it reminded me, my husband and I, we've been married 27 years. We have 4 children. We had 2 miscarriages. And I remember our first pregnancy was a miscarriage. And I remember thinking, oh, he's affected by this too. I had only been really prepared for my own emotions, but then to like see him like grieve because he's my other half and, he's lived in the house with me and it's happening to my body, but he couldn't really do a whole lot just to help other than support. It just reminded me of that. And so tell me real quick, like what made you even decide to get into this line of work? And then we'll get into some of the nitty gritty, but I just kind of want to know, your background and how you landed on this for a focus.
So I'll have to kind of go back to my childhood. It won't take too long, but
Sure, go for it.
honestly, I had severe cramps when I was a teenager to the
Okay.
point where I was just incapacitated. I almost was just suicidal every month because the pain was
Oh,
excruciating. And my mom took me to several different people, I swear some of them were mental health people. I don't know. She doesn't
Yeah.
remember, but I just know that eventually she took me to a gynecologist. The woman gave me the equivalent of some naproxen,
Okay.
and changed my life. So I was a cheerleader. I ran track. I was really active. And
Yeah.
every month I was just shut down. And I was literally in the bed, just with a
Uh-huh.
bucket on the side, and just was like, if I had to live this way, I just really don't. This is not even
Right. Right.
sustainable. So she
Okay.
changed my life. And that moment I was already inclined, towards science. I loved
Mhm.
dissecting the frogs, and I was that person that loved science anyway. So I just was like, if this is what being a doctor is, I can just give somebody a pill and change their life, then that's what I want to do.
Right.
So I pretty much knew at that moment I wanted to be a gynecologist because I was partial towards women,
Okay.
and what was going on with me. And then fast forward, I went into obstetrics and gynecology. I did high risk obstetrics for about 20 years. And then I actually started going through perimenopause, but I was completely taken. I was just off guard. I didn't know what was happening.
Mhm.
Most doctors, less than 2% of any time in training is put towards menopause. That's being generous. And
And yet
I
every woman will go through it. So
every woman's going
you-
through it.
you'd think they could
And
stretch that out a little bit instead of 2%, but okay.
yeah, so I realized that if I didn't, I was going through, like, I thought I was getting early Alzheimer's. I was mad. I couldn't sleep. And I was having hot flashes, but it was happening in my late 30s. So that was another reason why I didn't connect the dots, because it just never occurred to me that I was perimenopausal. I didn't really even understand what that meant. So
Right.
I started doing research, and I realized that if I didn't understand this, then the average woman
Mhm.
just couldn't
Yeah.
possibly, if I'm a gynecologist. So I left obstetrics, the high risk obstetrics field, and I left and just started my own practice, Tula Wellness and Aesthetics, and just had that focus on women's health and a more integrative. I did an integrative medicine fellowship to kind of help me understand the whole body and
Mhm.
mind, body, spirit. And so I just put all that together and used my own experience
Uh-huh.
informed how I got here, though, at the end of
Okay.
the day.
Well, thank you for getting here and for being willing to come and talk to people like me and the people that are listening. So, um, I'll tell you kind of about my menopause just a little bit because I think everybody's stories are so different. But I hit menopause when I was 45. I'm 53, and my mom had had a hysterectomy young, like in her 30s. So, in my head, I was always trained to think, okay, you kind of look at when your mom hit menopause, that's probably when you'll hit menopause. But I didn't know since my mom had a hysterectomy. So when I was 45, the truth is I thought I was pregnant. And I'm sneaking to the local Sunfresh buying pregnancy tests. Not that it would have been like scandalous because I'm married, happily, healthy, everything. But I'm like, am I going to be on the cover of People magazine, 45-year-old woman, which obviously there's women way older than that having babies. But I'm like sneaking pregnancy tests thinking what's happening that I'm missing periods and, not pregnant. And then I started having hot flashes. And that was my big sign that, okay, this is menopause, like the type of hot flashes where I'm waking up in the night and I'm just stripping clothes, and my body's on fire. So I finally went to a doctor who they put me on one of those, are they called trochees that you like?
Hmm.
And I didn't love those. They didn't help a lot, but then tested my hormones and I've been on a progesterone pill and an estrogen patch since I was like 47, 48, both of those. And so,
Perfect.
I a few years ago at the beginning of the pandemic, I don't know why I thought that when the world was shut down that this may be a good time to go off my hormones and see what happens. And awful, awful. And so I got back on those within like 4 or 5 months because I was like, I have never felt so awful and depressed and ragey at the same time. And so I've
Yeah.
been back on the hormones. So as long as I change that patch out, twice a week, we're good to go. But is that like, I mean, there's no such thing as normal when it comes to menopause, is there?
Well, yeah, I think there's a normal trend. I mean, at the end of the
Okay.
day, I guess the biggest myth that people have is that menopause is like you're just going to hit this thing and then it's kind of over, but it doesn't work that way, right? The experience is going to be different for everyone. The timing is going to be different for everyone. If the average menopause, and menopause is really only one day. It's just the 12 months without your menstrual cycle. So we talk about the term menopause, but
Right.
really we should be talking in terms of perimenopause, because that's when all of those symptoms and perimenopausal symptoms, it's not like once you're menopausal, your menopausal symptoms are different. Like they're all the same symptoms, just like you had the symptoms before you took it. And then
Okay.
you were probably menopausal for a while, so to
Uh-huh.
speak, no periods, everything.
Yes.
And then you stopped taking, and then your symptoms came back. Like you were having
Yes.
all of the things. So
Yes.
there's no distinction. So if you were, if you're going to be menopausal at 45, then you could have been perimenopausal easily at any 8 to 10 years
Mhm.
prior to that.
Yeah.
So what's normal is you're going to have perimenopausal symptoms. They may affect you significantly. They may not affect you very much at all. There are some people that are just breezing through and other people that are
Yeah.
literally suffering. And
Yeah.
that's all normal.
Yeah. So since getting on the hormones, I feel, normal-ish, body-wise, other than just carrying a lot of weight around my midsection, which I do think is, when you're in your 50s and menopausal, I think, because now when my blood work is done, I'm post-menopausal, obviously. But the things that I've noticed like up here, like mentally, for those of you that are watching on YouTube right now, is that, and I did a podcast on this show about this several years ago, is that I just don't have the same energy, mental capacity, um, ability to give a crap a lot of times as I did, years ago. And I'm like, is that age? Is that wisdom? Is that menopause? I don't know. But some of the symptoms that I've experienced in the last, like, I guess it would be 8 years that have kind of scared me. And you mentioned this in our intro is, like thinking that I was having early Alzheimer's. I mean, my husband has even said, Jen, I wonder if we need to take you to the doctor because it's like I
Mm.
can't retain information like I used to. And this is the sort of thing that's showing up in my business. I forget names. I don't remember details. We have a joke in our house that mom can only get 80% of my life right at any given time. So if I got you to the dentist, I made the appointment, I got you to the dentist, if it's the right month, we're going to consider that a win. But a lot of times I got the wrong day. Does that make sense? It's like I can't details that I used to be so good about, like I just don't have the same capacity anymore. And my brain fog is so intense that I have been thinking to myself, is this for real early onset of Alzheimer's or is this menopause? How do you differentiate? Because I don't know that I've found a clear answer.
Yeah, those are all really real symptoms and a great question. And I'll try to unpack it as best I can. But at the end of the day, during that perimenopausal time period, we are definitely going to see a decrease in cognition. There's really not even a name, like there's no real medical term that we've come up with to really describe kind of the cognitive changes that happen to women during this time. But it's definitely been established that up until menopause itself, there's definitely going to be can be a significant decline in your cognitive abilities. And for some women, myself included, not only is there that decline, but also what looks like the unmasking of ADHD type of symptoms. So I see this a lot in the clinic when patients tell me just like that. I see women who are, powerhouse women who are in their prime, they're reaching their peak, but at the same time, their brain is saying, yeah, no, not today. And
Yes.
so it's really a challenging moment. And this is like why entrepreneurs are like my sweet spot, because I go to conferences sometime and I see these, bad
Mhm.
women and they got $1 billion company, but I'm looking at it,
Right.
I'm like, yeah, she's falling apart. I can see it, right? Because the emotional impact that has on you when, you really have to just exert so much more energy, but it is
To
very
get the same
normal.
results.
Yes,
Yes.
it's very,
Yes.
very normal. And most women are going to come back to a baseline a few years after. I actually just
Okay.
finished interviewing Dr. Pauline Mackey, who is probably one of the top scientists now looking at brain health in women. She was the
Okay.
first woman to neuroimage the brains of women and to look at the impact of hormones. So this is a whole new area of research. We're just really starting to figure it out. But what we know is that there is this decline. It scares a lot of people, and the
Yes.
stress that we're under, the sleep is huge. So just by correcting the sleep, that in and of itself can really, really just not completely eliminate. But what's
Mhm.
happening is you're waking up in the middle of the night. You got hot
Yeah.
flashes. So your whole sleep is disrupted.
Disrupted.
And
Yes.
once that happens, we have data now that shows that, and they did this looking at working women
Uh-huh.
and the impact of what just not being able to sleep has done. And so their productivity goes down. Businesses are actually losing money. I mean, there's over
Mhm.
$1 billion a issue in terms of the loss. There's a cost to women not being productive and women not being able to sleep and women not getting these symptoms
That's
managed.
That's good. That's major. Every businesswoman that's listening right now is like ding, 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 ding. Um, do you like so like in your practice and when you're helping women, like what are some things that you suggest to help women sleep better? Because so since I've been on hormones, that has helped with, so there's no more hot flashes, which is great. And I have no issues falling asleep. It's the staying asleep. And it's almost
Right.
like my body gets into this pattern because I know, some of the other symptoms are like, urinary incontinence. I mean, I have to get up in the middle of the night and pee. I just do. And I'm like, it's so frustrating because then I'm awake and then it's getting back into the sleep. And so, what are some of the things that you suggest just to help women sleep better at night? I've tried the CBD gummies or whatever, or melatonin, but melatonin makes me have nightmares. So I don't like doing that. And so I haven't really figured out anything in particular that's helpful.
Yeah. So truthfully, and I actually just learned this because I interviewed Dr. Mackey actually last week, and she made me aware of an app, and it's cognitive behavioral therapy for sleep. They found from a research standpoint
Okay.
that this cognitive behavioral therapy has been the
Mhm.
best. We're getting the best results in terms of helping women sleep. And then my
Ooh,
question to her was like, well, we're
me
busy.
taking notes right
Who's
now.
going to do this? But it's actually, and I'll have to, I just learned about it, but it's
Okay.
through the Veterans Association,
Okay.
and it's cognitive behavioral therapy for sleep, and it's an app, and
Okay.
it's
If
called
and if you can get it to me, I can just put it in the show notes and people can read
yeah,
the show
it's
notes and
called
get back to
CBTI Coach. And this has been validated in studies to really be when they looked at, melatonin versus, they haven't looked at cannabis so much because there's so many
me.
different strains. It's much
Yeah.
stronger now. Um, and so alcohol, for example, is not a good thing. Alcohol is
No,
going to disrupt your
it
sleep. It may
disrupts your
help you
sleep.
fall
Yeah.
asleep, but it will disrupt your sleep
Yes.
pattern.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, a lot of women, we self-medicate, right? We're either going to self-medicate with some food, or we're going to
Mhm.
self-medicate with some alcohol,
Mhm.
or we're going to self-medicate with some gummies, because whatever it
Or
is,
social media right before bed, which is
or
also
that part,
terrible for
yeah,
your sleeping. Yeah.
that part, all of those things are, so
Yeah.
I'm kind of a fan of the gummies, but there's
Mhm.
no data around that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
very individual. For some people, they can't tolerate it.
Mhm.
A
Yeah.
very small dose, like a 5 milligram, is really helpful. There's some that have different, CBD. I can't remember all the different parts,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
not just
Some of them
THC.
have THC and some don't. Yeah. It's a wild, wild world to me too, one that I don't really understand. But I know that like for me, I have noticed that if I go to bed earlier, it's like when I had babies and I would think, oh, if I keep them up later at night, then they'll sleep in the morning. Never happens. I keep them up later at night, they get up earlier. So it's almost like if I'll go to bed a little bit earlier, I'll actually sleep a little bit later sometimes. It's like sleep kind of begets sleep. But I have
Yeah,
to be really disciplined in that because the truth is I don't want to go to bed at 10:30. My husband's still awake and he's a night owl. And so I have found that if I don't eat before bed, if I get off of social media, because what I used to think, Dr. Ariana, is that I like if I would be on social media, I would think that that was like calming me down. But when I really started paying attention to my body, I'm like, wait, I might look calm on the outside as I'm scrolling, but on the inside, I'm like spiraling because I'm reading things that are making me mad, or I'm like, I don't even know why I follow this chick, or I disagree completely with what they said, or now I feel lesser than. So I'm feeling all these emotions on Facebook or Instagram and then trying to go
yeah,
to bed. And so again, like my outside may look calm, but my insides are all riled up. So I
yeah,
have found that reading before bed is way more helpful for me. Going to bed earlier is way more helpful for me. I've been trying to stop drinking so much water and stuff before bed. That way I'm not having to get up and pee. And those, when I do those things regularly, that does help to some degree. But part of me is like, is this just my life from now till death? I just struggle with
right.
staying asleep.
Well, sleep hygiene, I mean, and I love that term and I hate that term at the same time
Sleep
because it requires
hygiene.
discipline.
Oh,
And, full
yeah.
disclosure, I got a little over 4 hours of sleep last night. Why? Because I, had a conversation with someone and then I was sitting out on the patio and my husband came out and talked to me and I was like, oh, I'm just really want to enjoy this moment. And he stays up later. So I'm up at least an extra
Yeah.
hour. And, it just threw my whole night off
Mhm.
and I couldn't turn off my head. I couldn't turn off my brain. And
Yeah.
that's what really keeps so many of us awake as women because we're in our head. That's why it affects your libido, it
Mhm.
affects your ability to sleep, and it just affects just overall your sense of
Yeah.
well-being because you're constantly just going. The
Right.
monkey is just going and
Right.
going and going.
Well, I'll speak to the libido part, which my 21-year-old son edits this podcast, so he's gonna like die a little inside about this. But I know that a lot of menopausal women really like their libido goes way down. I have had the very opposite.
Good for you.
I know, and I'm like, praise God. Okay.
Good
It
for
is
you.
fabulous to be in your 50s. My husband and I are both very happy people. And so does that ever happen? Or am I like the one in a million that
Well, you're
just
kind of
be
no.
counting my
I was gonna
blessings?
say you're not completely weird, but um, I would say on average, more women complain of a
Okay.
lesser libido, and a lot of that has to do. I just tell people it's like you can't have libido when number one, you're parasympathetic, you're sympathetic, you're just
Mhm.
fight or flight all the time. When you're
Yes.
in your head, when you're
Mhm.
not sleeping,
Yeah.
and when you're really not in tune with your own body
Yeah.
and really communicating well with your partner, because as we age, things got to switch up a little bit and it's just not
Yeah.
the same. And so some women are very uncomfortable, whether it's with their own body image or being able to
Mhm.
communicate with their partners to really kind of dial in what they really need at this
Yeah.
point. But that said, it is very normal to have a low libido. But
Mhm.
I do have there are the rare patients. I don't say they're rare, but I
I'm
would
just,
say
I'm over
definitely
here just
10% or
curious.
less of my experience. I'm not saying that's the number, but
Yeah.
I would say the average woman that I see does not have an increase in libido. The average
Okay.
woman I see has a
Yeah.
decrease, but maybe that's just
Well,
because
I'm just
they
going to count my
self-select.
blessings, and I'll
Count
probably
them,
also
girl.
have a complete vulnerability hangover from this conversation in the morning, but that's okay. But maybe it will just make some women encouraged that there's help because, and it's possibly because, I'm on a decent dosage of hormones, which do you think that when women go into menopause, do they need to get their hormones checked? Like, are you a huge advocate for testing and then supplementing where needed?
So in theory, you don't need your hormones checked. So what
Okay.
happens, and then it's another myth. I write
Ooh,
about it in the
I am about to love what you're about to say. I'm about to love
yeah.
it. Go for it.
Um, so I wrote a book called The Menopause Myth, What Your Mother, Doctor, and Friends Never Share It With You About Life After 35. And so several of those myths we're talking about today, but in particular, this idea that you're going to be able to go to the doctor, they're going to say, okay, we're
Mhm.
going to do these labs, and then they're going to tell you exactly where you're supposed to be.
Right.
That's just not even correct. It doesn't work that way. Please don't buy, I'm sorry, but don't buy those kits, at
Mhm.
the store that tell you whether you're at menopause. You don't need to, because this is a diagnosis really of really exclusion and just of looking at symptoms. It's really
Right. Like
straightforward.
how you
You're having
feel.
hot flashes, you
Yes.
can't sleep, you're irritable, you're
Mhm.
perimenopausal. I don't need to look at your labs. Now, that
The
said,
end. Thank you for
Mhm.
saying the end. Full stop right there. Thank you.
So that said, however, I do a full panel on every single person that I see because I want to see what your thyroid is doing, what your lipids are doing, what all your blood work. And so in that, I'm going to include your sex hormones. I'm going to look at your
Mhm.
testosterone. I'm going to look at your estrogen. I'm going to look at your FSH, which I would say if there were one lab that could give us like the magic answer, it
Yep.
might be the FSH, because what happens is as our estrogen levels go down, our brain is the anterior pituitary is like, hey, where's estrogen? So it's follicle stimulating hormone. So it's going to
Yeah.
say, hey, follicles, talking to the ovaries, wants the ovaries to make more estrogen. Well, the ovaries are like, hey, we're done here. We're not doing this. And so the brain is like, no, 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 we need estrogen. So your follicle stimulating hormone is going to go up, up, up. It can go over 100. Whereas when you're reproductive, your FSH is going to be somewhere between, 0 and 5.
Okay.
So once we see a certain FSH, it's like, yeah, it's a wrap. Like if your FSH is over 40, it's a wrap, right?
Okay.
You're not getting pregnant.
Yes.
You're not like it's done. But
Yeah.
that said, during that perimenopausal time, your hormones are fluctuating every single day. So if I check your labs on Monday, by
Mhm.
Friday, they're going to look different. They're actually going to look different on Tuesday. So the labs don't tell me anything. They just give me
Yes.
maybe a snapshot view, and I look at trends. I still look at the labs, but technically, I don't treat you based on the labs. I treat you based
Mhm.
on your symptoms.
Okay, I love that so much because I do have blood work done like every 6 months, looking at different levels. And I asked my doctor the last time, like, do you think we maybe need to adjust my hormones at all? Because we've been at the same level for 8 years. And he's like, well, if you feel this, this, and this, and your hormone levels, like it's a little low, but it's still inside normal. And I'm like, I know, but I still have so much like brain fog and things that I still feel like not
Yes.
totally myself. And then, related to that, I see all these people on social media who are talking about the use of GLP-1s, like semaglutides and things, which I am not on, also not opposed to anybody else who is, but how they help brain fog, and especially in menopausal women. And so can you speak to that at all? I'm just curious because the
Yeah.
brain fog for me, because all of my other symptoms seem to be betterish. It's just the fatigue and the brain fog and feeling like I do have ADHD. That is really at this point in being postmenopausal, the only thing that I'm like, I wish I could still feel like I did in my early 40s when I felt
Right.
like I was ready to go every day. I can think quick on my feet because as an entrepreneur, I need to be able to think quickly on my feet. I need to make decisions fast. I need to be able to remember details and clients. And when that's slipping, then I'm starting to doubt my abilities and capabilities. And is the favor still on me to do this? And so I don't like feeling like my brain is still what's being affected.
No, you're in good company, and I struggle with that myself. It's an area that's still a little murky, and you
Mhm.
may have a combination of things. So just listening to you, I would say I'd also want to look at your thyroid. A lot
Mhm.
of times we go to providers and they say, "Oh, your thyroid's fine," but I would say more conventional doctors look at the thyroid differently than those of us who practice more what we call functional or integrative medicine.
Yes, which I'm
So
a
we
big
have
fan
a
of.
little bit of a different view of
Uh-huh.
what's optimal. So there's a specific lab like your free T3, not to get too technical, but there's certain labs that I would say, and this is why I love, for me, I actually have Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune
Yes.
disorder that
And
affects
several
the
people.
thyroid. And so that actually has informed my whole practice because I was struggling with exactly that, even though I was on some hormone therapy and certain things that still weren't working. Like I couldn't lose weight. I still had the brain fog. Uh,
Mhm.
and it just didn't make sense to me. But
Yeah.
as a doctor, I'm looking at my labs. I'm like, based on my training, my labs are normal. But
Mhm.
I know all the symptoms of hypothyroidism, and I was like a walking poster child. So I finally found someone who looked at, things in a little bit more holistically, so to speak.
Yes.
And I realized that the critical lab, the critical um, part of our thyroid is the hormone is T3, but what most providers are looking at is just your TSH. So your TSH works just like that FSH I was
Uh-huh.
telling you about
Yeah.
earlier. Your TSH is in the brain. It senses what your thyroid is putting out. So if if for conventional doctor's sake, if your TSH is below like 4.5, then they're
Mhm.
like, you're fine. Everything is
Right.
fine. They
Right.
don't necessarily look at the hormone levels themselves.
Yeah.
So that's what I was looking at. I was like, TSH is fine. But actually, in the functional medicine world, we look at T3. T3 is the only active thyroid hormone. The
Okay.
T4 that your doctor is looking at isn't the active. It
Okay.
breaks down into T3, or what's called reverse T3s. It's an inactive form. So you can have what looks like a completely normal TSH, but your
Mhm.
T3 is super low.
Okay.
And again, stress
Mhm.
is huge, huge, huge. And that just kind of drives this whole cascade of your
Yeah.
thyroid dysfunction. So
Okay.
I forgot what the question was, but
That's okay.
there you go.
Well, I was just asking, like, I know I've seen a lot of people talking about like the
Oh, the
GLP-1s and
GOPs.
semi-glutides again, which I'm not using and I'm not opposed to other people who are. I just, when there's a couple people I follow who are talking about menopausal women having good results using like a small dosage of those to
Yes.
help with brain fog.
I don't prescribe them per se for brain fog. GLPs are going to help decrease inflammation at the end of the day. And
Right.
really, that's also just driven by our lifestyle. So, stress, lack of
Yeah.
sleep,
Cortisol
processed
lovers.
foods,
Yes.
all of those things are, I mean, everybody wants a pill, everybody wants a shot. I get it. But there are just a lot of things that you really should consider in your lifestyle to
Yeah.
affect what's inflammation, because inflammation is really what's
What's
driving
driving?
all of this
Yeah.
brain
Right.
fog and things of that sort. So we want to do things that are going to bring that down. So that's going to be, I know I'm driving at home, but it's going to be the sleep. It's going to be the yoga. It's going to be meditation. Like all the things that you thought you didn't have to do in your 40s, especially, and definitely in your 30s. And now it's really not negotiable. It's like,
Okay.
if you don't do them, then this is what the consequence is going to be. And we can find all types of drugs and things to help get around it, which I'm not knocking because I take those too. I'm all for it.
Right. Yeah.
And they do amazing things, but I don't want that to get lost in
Right.
what the work is that you really have to do during this period.
Right. So I know there's going to be people who are listening right now, and I do have some more questions for you, but I already know there's going to be women who right now are going, does this woman work with people like online? Like, do you do virtual consults, calls, anything like that? Are you only local in Tucson?
I do. I do. I
Okay.
see, I don't see a whole lot of patients because I'm doing a lot of things. I'm trying to be an
You're more
entrepreneur
educating at this point.
myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm trying to find that balance.
Yeah.
But yes, I still do see patients, and we definitely here in Arizona, we obviously can do that. And I
Right.
have, it tends to happen when I go to a conference, I speak or
Mhm.
something, and then somebody will be like, can I, so
They're
it's,
like, fix me, fix
yeah.
me. Yes. Um,
Yeah, so it's great.
yeah.
I love doing it because it's life changing. It's
Yeah.
it's life changing, and it brings that whole feeling back to me where what I started with, which is
Yeah.
like I literally am, I mean, my tagline is changing the world one vagina at a time, but I'm really just changing the world in
Yeah.
terms of women really being able to step into their own and not feeling so gaslit or unheard or like they're going
Mhm.
crazy, because I
Yes.
mean, this is such a critical time, and when women are in their prime and then their brain is betraying them and their body is like, what the hell?
Yes.
It's so just unsettling. And so to
Yes.
help somebody just get out of that whole fog and for them to come back after I've, put them on their
Mhm.
hormones or
Yeah.
whatever, thyroid, whatever
Yes.
diet, whatever it is, for them to come back and to see them walk in the office, I'm just like, yeah,
Ah, and that's like
there's
confirmation on why
nothing
you do
better.
what you do. Yeah. And speaking of gaslit, in the last several years, I was thinking, and I actually wrote this in my notes to tell you about that. I've had several like just weird things that have started happening in my body that like every doctor I've gone to has just been like, well, it's probably your age. It's menopause. Like, let me give you an example. Many years ago, I started having something they diagnosed as burning mouth syndrome, which I'm sure you know, but
Yes.
I'm like, what the heck? All I could say was like, it feels like I just scalded the inside of my mouth, my tongue especially, with soup. That's all I can tell you. My mouth is on fire, and it wasn't like every day, but it was so random. And so I did some stuff on Instagram because I have a large following there, and my Instagram people are amazing. And they're like, "Oh, you have burning mouth syndrome." I'm like, "What?" So I Google it, and so I call my dentist, who's the one that I was asking about it. Anyway, they're like, "Oh, menopause," and I'm like, "But is it really?" And then I developed TMJ, and
Yep.
so then, so now my mouth's on fire and my jaw's aching. And they're like, oh, stress, menopause. And then I started an ear ringing like almost 4 years ago. And it's just my left ear. It rings every single day, nonstop. Dr. Arnie, I bet I have gone to 5, 6 different doctors and nobody knows. So several of them are just like menopause. And so like, is it always menopause, or is menopause just what they say when they don't know? And I'm of this age
No, actually, that's the thing, is that we're really just now at the cusp of just figuring all of this out, right? So burning mouth, I just found out about that about last year.
really,
And now I've had a few people, but yeah, just even
it's
frozen. Now there's a
miserable.
syndrome called musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause. And so the frozen shoulder, the joint pain is actually one of the number one symptoms before hot flashes. Joint pain is one of the number one symptoms, but no one's ever really
Really?
put all of this together. We're accumulating a list. And yes, it is. And how do we distinguish menopause from aging? I don't know. It's all on that spectrum, but
Yeah.
we do know that we're all going to go through menopause because that's
Yeah.
happening. So it doesn't really matter. You get a certain age, you're going to go
Yes.
through menopause. You may have some of those unique symptoms, but everything you describe, you think up to at least 30% of women are going to lose at least one tooth during perimenopause. Like it's
What?
your
Really?
dental. Yes, it's serious. Delta Dental actually has really been very proactive in this conversation around your dental health with menopause. And
Mhm.
that was another, I didn't even realize that I was losing teeth and stuff was happening. And I didn't even know that was me. I didn't learn that until like 10 years
I
later. I
had
was
no
like,
idea
wow,
either.
that's crazy.
Man, that is a whole thing. Okay, so what's the average woman who's listening to us right now to do? I mean, I know you have a podcast that they could go listen to. Remind me the name of that.
Stay juicy.
Stay Juicy Podcast. Okay, you have your book on menopause. Can they go and just grab that on Amazon?
Amazon,
Okay, and the name of that book again is?
The Menopause Myth, What Your Mother, Doctor, and Friends Never Shared with You About Life After 35.
I'm such a big fan of that whole title, the whole subtitle. And then what next? Should the average person that's listening go find maybe a functional medicine doctor and get some tests run, or like for the woman who's listening that's like heard, because I think sometimes we can have a knee hurt and it doesn't really affect our day to day and you're like, the knee hurts, but I can live with it. And maybe menopausal symptoms are like that. But then there's times when like your knee hurts so bad that I'm on a plane last night flying home from Florida and I'm thinking I am going to start bawling at any second. And I'm not a crier, but my knee is in so much pain. Somebody's got to fix this. Like, so if your menopausal symptoms are like that, where you're like, I can't do this, something's got to change. What should the average woman do?
I think the average woman should go to menopause.org.
Okay.
That is a site that is the site of the Menopause Society. And on that site, they're going to have providers who have been trained in menopause.
Okay.
So if you are in particular going to your provider, again, another myth is that your gynecologist knows anything about menopause. That's a myth. Your
My
gynecologist was not
gynecologist is like
trained.
28 years old. I mean, she
Right.
has a gorgeous white smile and her breasts are still high. And so I'm like, yeah, she knows nothing about
Yeah.
menopause.
Well, she knows nothing from it experientially, and she knows
Exactly.
nothing from it from her training. Everything I learned about menopause, I taught myself or went to a course.
Mhm.
That's just what.
Right.
So I would say go to that site, especially if you have a provider who's telling you, oh, it's normal, you'll be fine, or
Yeah.
I don't believe in hormones, or oh, you couldn't possibly be menopausal or perimenopausal. It's just like the ignorance around
Mhm.
providers in this area is scary, and it's unacceptable, and that's changing. But that said, that would be a good way to find a provider. There's a new documentary that just
Okay.
came out a few weeks ago called The M Factor. I think it was great because it really just helped you see the whole picture.
Okay.
So think about
The
that.
end
And
factor, like END factor?
I'm sorry, M as in menopause,
Oh, the M factor. Okay,
the
got
M
it.
factor.
Okay.
And then, they can, I would say, hit me up.
Yeah. Do you
My
on social media, do you play more on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube? Where can they
Instagram,
find you?
I'm at Dr. Arianna on
Okay,
Instagram.
perfect. Perfect. Okay. Do you have like 3 more minutes? I can just ask you some like rapid fire wild questions just so we get to know you more as a human being. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Okay, give me one thing you could spend hours doing.
Sitting on my patio, listening to my favorite artist these days, Tim's.
Tim's. Okay.
TEMS.
TEMS. Fabulous. What was your last big financial splurge?
Um, I guess it was I went to Turks and Caicos, and my husband and I celebrated our 25th wedding anniversary, and 40 of our friends and family accompanied us. And it was the
Wow.
most amazing 8 days of my life. And it wasn't a huge finance, it was huge enough, but
Huge enough. I mean, 40 people that went with you. That's amazing. Congratulations.
I mean,
I
I didn't
just,
pay for all of them, but
yeah.
just getting all the things. Yeah, it was, yeah.
I read
It
a
was amazing.
statistic just last night that only like 30% of all marriages that don't end in divorce, which is, 50% of the population, but will ever make it to 30 years. So you are well on your way. So
Hallelujah.
congratulations. That's amazing. All right. What book is currently on your nightstand or in your
Um,
Kindle or in your
Robert
Kindle?
Robert Greene, um, and it's called oh gosh,
That's okay. I can Google while we are talking. Robert Greene books.
Daily. Well, I have a couple of them, but
Okay.
I'm just been getting into him lately. He wrote I think it's the 49 Laws of Power, but he has
Okay.
all of these other books. And of course, I haven't,
Oh yeah,
listen, I have a lot of
ooh,
books. They haven't
yeah.
been read.
Okay.
They're on my dresser,
He's
but
got 6 bestsellers: The 48 Laws of Power, The
yeah,
33 Strategies of War, The 50th Law,
no,
recent The Laws of Human Nature.
that one. That's what I'm reading.
Fabulous.
The
Fabulous.
Laws of Human Nature.
Okay, awesome. And then give me one thing you can't live without.
Um, oh,
She's measuring her answer here, folks.
I know. I'm definitely
If you're
measuring.
watching us on YouTube,
I'm definitely not going to say the first thing that comes to mind.
I'm
Um,
like, is she blushing?
um,
It can be anything. It could be raw
uh,
chocolate chip cookie
yeah,
dough,
I'm going to
dog,
say Prosecco.
prosecco. Fabulous. I
Yeah.
love that answer. I love that. Thank you for being here. This was fabulous. And again, I know I told you before we came on, my audience is mostly women. They're mostly women in business, and thank you for just validating what so many of us are feeling like, am I crazy? Am I going crazy? But also like giving us some concrete things that we could perhaps do. And so I'm going to suggest that anyone that's listening right now, that you go grab Dr. Arianna's book off of Amazon, start there. And I also just want to encourage everybody who's listening to talk to their girlfriends. Why is it that we just don't talk enough about this? Like, and we maybe talk about the hot flashes, but I think the other parts of it, it's almost like sometimes scary to say the quiet things out loud. Like, I'm feeling like I'm losing my mind here, folks. I'm losing words. I'm forgetting my neighbor's name. And so
It's
thank you for
real.
it really is real. And I wish that there was just more conversation around it, because I think that a problem shared is a problem halved. You just feel like it's not, you're just shining some light on the things that feel really dark is just so helpful from so many different perspectives. So thank you for just doing that with us here today. And I just am praying a blessing over you and everything you're doing. And women really need these conversations. So I'm already thinking of like 3 friends of mine that have podcasts that I can call and be like, hey, you need to have her on. Because I know your audience is like mine. It's women in business. And this was just full of hope. So thank you for that. And
Thank you.
I'm
And
going to be
that's
going
kind
to
of what,
listen to your podcast. And then I want everybody to go follow you also on Instagram. So
yeah, and that's really where the podcast kind of came from, is that we're there. I'm still finding my voice. It's very new. It's only been a few months, but it was really around having real conversations, because
yes,
we can talk about the other stuff, but we're not talking about under the hood,
yes,
what's really happening. And a lot of us are suffering in silence. And I really try to want to have as much open conversation.
yeah.
So that's what Stay Juicy is about: juicy lives, juicy experiences, and juicy vaginas. That's it.
Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you.
Thank you.